Next up, we have a equally informative and lively discussion on CLE. And we're going to go, well, I think we're just a little bit behind time, but we're going to go right up to the lunch hour with this program. We have three gentlemen with us for this CLE discussion. Terry Hill, who hopefully you've all met, is the Programs Division Director for the bar and a wealth of resources on just about every topic. And also with us today we have Mark Brown from the Tax Law Section and Imhoff, who is the Vice Chair of the bar's CLE Committee. And we will enjoy hearing from all three of them on all things CLE.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, I am the director of the Programs Division. Terry Hill, I think I have spoke to you, emailed you, or emailed your predecessors at some point in the time over the past year or two. I encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions regarding sections, programmings, the bar, and certainly CLE. Just very briefly, I oversee 6 departments here at the bar as the Division Director of Programs: Legal Publications, Law Office Management Assistant Service, as it is currently known, but changing, Legal Specialization in Education, which Donna spoke about, Professional Development, which is essentially CLE and all of the section activities in Dixie and the Program Administrator Department, Public Service Programs, which is Lawyer Referral Service, and then the Meetings and Conventions. So I kind of dabble in all those different things. So if you have any questions for me outside of this presentation, let me know.
And my name is Mark Brown. I work with Kay Scholler in the Trust and Estates Department in West Palm Beach. I'm with the tax section. By the way, I'd like to introduce the other people from the tax section here. We have Kristen Keene here, the chair of the tax section, and we have Jim Barrett. And the reason I'm on the panel today is I was the past director of the Education Division for 2 years. Before that, I was an assistant director. So I know a lot about how the tax section puts on CLE. So it's coming from a section perspective.
And I'm Imhoff. I'm vice chair of the CLE committee. I've been chair of the committee twice and have been the chair of the practicing before the legislative CLE for about 14 years, including this past January. And also I'm on the government law CLE committee.
Very good. Well, I think what we are going to do is I think each of us have some things that we want to share with you generally, and then I think that you will have some things you want to share with us by way of information or questions or concerns. But just briefly, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is in planting, implementing, organizing CLE programming. The biggest thing is thanks to the sections for carrying that burden to educate Florida lawyers. The mission of the Florida Bar CLE Committee is to educate Florida lawyers, but the Florida Bar in and of itself doesn't do much at all by the way of planning and implementing and organizing CLE programs. That heavy lifting is done and done very well by the various sections and divisions of the bar, and for that we thank you. One of the biggest things that I want you to take away from what I tell you today is for so long it's been hard to have this paradigm shift. Sections think that a CLE is planned, implemented, and organized for 6 months, that the live event happens, and then the event is done. And I'm here to tell you that that is where it's beginning, because that's all the profit starts there. 6-7 years ago, 66% of the profit or the revenue came from live in-person CLEs, and only 33% came from what we would call aftermarket, which would be your CDs, DVDs, and on-demand. That has shifted and is exactly the reverse now. 66% of your revenue and profitability is coming from the aftermarket, and only 33% or 1/3 is coming from your live in-person programming. So the day the event ends is not when you pack up and move on to the next one. It's when you pack up and move on to the next one, but continue marketing and promoting the one that just finished. And I would say there's been a lot of focus on this, wanting to know profitability within 60 or 90 days after a course happens. I can tell you that if you really want to know that, most of your courses are not going to be profitable within 60 or 90 days. Reality is because if you were going to launch it, if you were a corporate business or a business and we're taking a new product to market and you were going to spend many hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, or millions of dollars taking a profit, you're not going to realize that profit in 60 or 90 days after the launch. So you really kind of have to look at it as each individual CLE as being a profit venture, a business model, and each course number really essentially launches for profitability purposes after the live event has taken place and it gets to the CD or the on-demand or the DVD platform. So I think that's my biggest takeaway that I want everybody to leave with. I'll also talk about marketing, and you can build the greatest program with the highest quality speakers with the best known names, but you leave out the important step of marketing or delayed marketing or missing key marketing opportunities, and no one's going to come to that wonderful CLE that you've planned, programmed, implemented with high speakers, some with honorarium, some without. So the marketing piece and hitting those key marketing deadlines is important as well.
Yeah, I think some of the things I want to hit on today is I think it's very important to try to develop annual programs. We've noticed from the tax section's perspective that these annual programs could really be great money generators. A lot of them do very well after market. We do an annual wealth protection program in May that's very successful. And then the thing I would encourage you to do is to come up with a signature program. And in the tax section, I would say our signature program is our International Tax Conference. And between attorneys and CPAs, we get about 400 people attending that. And for a 2,000 member section, the tax section is a little bit above 2,000 members, that's an excellent attendance for us to get. And those signature conferences that I think all the sections should try to develop really could be a major program, and it could be a great revenue generator. And then one of the other big things you were saying about marketing the programs, I think sometimes we forget about that. The people who are putting together the programs forget the importance that they have to market it. The rest of the people don't necessarily know that much about what they're doing. And so you have to get that brochure out in time. I was always harping on that. The deadline to get that brochure, I think it says it's 12 weeks, and then you're supposed to cancel the program if you don't get it done within 10 weeks. We come against that pressure a lot. And so you need that brochure finalized so you can get it out to the public and market it heavily.
Yeah, and along those same lines is, as I call it, the new age of the CLE, that marketing is important. And for example, when you're putting together a section program, who might other people who might be interested in that program? What other groups maybe outside the bar might be interested in that program, and how can you get your marketing brochure or information out to them? If your section has affiliate members, they can be helpful in that area of identifying other groups that you can market to. And as Terry said, under the current structure, the aftermarket sales are extremely important, and we've come across that in the government law section. And this year, for the first time, we had the practicing before the legislature on DVD, and I think we're doing a pretty good aftermarket sales on that, because it was here. It was a course here in town, at the Capitol, in the chambers, and also in committee rooms. So a lot of people couldn't come to see the live, and we're hoping to get a lot more people to watch the DVD. And Terry helped us on that, and kind of emphasized that we were doing audio tapes the last time we did it, and was emphasizing how the DVDs sell so much better.
Well, it's not, surprisingly, there's still a huge market for audio CDs and video DVDs. I expected over the last 5 years to see that start declining as the on-demand 24/7 catalog grew, and we have seen that grow phenomenally. But we're still doing over $1 million a year in audio CDs collectively across all the sections in revenue, which still shocks me. With the video component is important more so on the 24/7 on-demand side, because if you've got a 4-hour or 6-hour program and someone is purchasing it in the on-demand catalog, we're seeing that the sales for the video versions of programs is almost double or triple that, depending on the section, of what the audio version of the program is. So having the audio program available is important, because you need that for both the audio CD and for the on-demand version of the audio. But people, if it's a larger, longer program, people are more in tune. At least what their habits have been over the past 4 years has been to want to watch it as opposed to only listen to it.
Yeah, and we've been looking at marketing to other professionals. The tax section is very interested in doing that. I think that's essential to do. Obviously, we try to market a lot to CPAs. We try to market to other section members. For example, we have an October CLE, and it's going to be, it's called, a very catchy title, the ABCs and XYZs of LLCs. And that's going to be October 24th in Fort Lauderdale. And it's going to have a tax component and a business law component. So obviously, we're going to try to get over to the business law section representatives and see if they're willing to, send that out to their members. So we're going to do that type of thing. I think it's very important to get other sections involved. The other thing that I did as part of a marketing plan was I tried to get contacts in different groups with different organizations, not just the Florida Bar, but if I'm the member of an East Coast Estate Planning Council in Palm Beach or the Palm Beach Tax Institute, I tried to get a list of all those people who could be good contact points at those different groups and see if they would be willing in one way or another to market our programs. They might say something about the program before their meeting starts. They might be willing to e-blast their members. And so it might be a good idea to go around throughout your section, try to get a list of different contact points within different areas of the state, so you don't, you cover the entire breadth of the section. And then when you have a CLE, see if they're willing to e-blast out our CLE, see if they're willing to mention it at a meeting, because a lot of times we are also members of those sections. A lot of times we're in the leadership of those sections. We're past presidents, things like that, and they're very willing and receptive to help us market the programs. Now, we always try to market with the CPAs. I'm also a CPA. The CPAs aren't as receptive. They're very, I don't know if it's just that bottom line thing, but whenever everybody always says we should go to the FICPA, and we do partner with the FICPA on the ITC conference, but sort of like a one-off conference, it's very difficult to get the CPAs to market our programs, but sometimes you could get some relationships locally where they're willing to do it. So that's a continuing thing that we're looking at, is looking at different groups to help market our programs.
Now, I'm going to ask Terry a question on that, various issues. If you're using people from outside the bar, can you give them the same fee structure that you give your section members, or do they have the fee for the non-section members?
That is generally left up to the individual sections, and that was decided by the CLE committee a couple of years ago, that a section can have a single price for everybody, and some sections do that. The price is $195, no matter whether you're a section member or not, and it's promoted as a discounted price for everybody. You can do a section member price and a non-section member price. You can do we have sections to do a section member price and a public defender or state attorney price and a non-section member price. So you can do that. I think that it's easier to do from a finance and accounting standpoint and order entry standpoint is if it's an identifiable group in the bar. Otherwise, it ends up being the honor system. If you say you want to give everybody who practices public interest law a discount, or everybody who is a government lawyer a discount, and a section want to do that, well, our system would only tell you if they're a government lawyer, if they've self-identified themselves as a government lawyer, but there's a lot of people who are government lawyers who don't identify themselves as government lawyers. So when you're doing those types of things, and it's not very indifferent with state attorney or public defenders, if they're using an email address or some address, it depends on how they're registering. So a lot of times it may end up depending on the honor. If you want to do CPAs, we're not in there registering as a CPA through the bar. We're not going to have a way to verify that they're CPAs or trust officers or anything else. And if they're registering, I think with your conference, the CPAs register for the most part through FICPA.
Right. That's a special conference because we're putting that conference on jointly. So there are people registering through, the bar, and then there are different, and a lot of those people, by the way, are members of both. And there was an issue this year, I think, where they said, hey, we have to match what the FICPA is doing because they're getting more members to register through that side, because I think they were giving a multi-firm discount, if you're having a lot of people attend from the same firm. So we said, all right, we need to match that. But if it's just if we don't have a partnership with them on a particular program, which is almost every other thing we do, then they're going to sign up as a non-member. But the other thing we do, we don't charge everyone the same price. I think we try to encourage everyone to join the tax section. There's always a tax issue involved. So what we typically do is we price it so that the section membership price is one price, and then the difference in price is the exact price to join the section. And so you're trying to encourage people to actually join your section, and I think, I'm pretty sure Reptile does that too. So that's a very common thing that the sections will do, is they'll charge a differential to try to drive membership up. Because that's really one thing, that's one of our primary purposes, is to increase membership.
Yes, but sections do have some amount of flexibility on pricing and who they can discount to. The key to that, and it's vitally important, because sometimes we do have to say, no, you can't do it, is you have to do it at the beginning of the process. Is if there's already advertising and promotion and brochures and the website registration system, everything is set up to account for a $195 price and a $225 price, we can't 3 weeks before the program, when the numbers are low, go in and offer a $75 price or a $95 price. It's important to make that decision early on in the planning process in order to be able to get it through the systems and all the advertising and all the marketing.
Right, and sometimes what we do is we'll actually look to increase the price above the bar recommended price. A lot of times we're trying to bring in a real national speaker to our program. We had a program where we brought in the former commissioner of the IRS, and we'll try to bring in out-of-town speakers. And a lot of times, if you just go with the bar default rate, you're going to easily wind up with a loss on that CLE program. So you could come back to your section administrator and say, I don't think the rate of $175 is appropriate for this CLE. I think it should be, a higher rate in this instance. And I think recently, I think we've only had one program recently that lost any money. And it was a very small loss when I include aftermarket sales. So most of our programs have made profit by looking out at, what we're pricing it at, the costs, and you have to be careful for all those factors to have a successful CLE.
No, I agree. And the other thing to keep in mind, too, is the various different types of CLE programming. When you're planning your CLEs across the various different sections, there's still a market for live in-person CLE. It is declining. I'm one of those who will not go to a live in-person CLE when I can do it at home, on my laptop, from my iPhone, from my iPad, on the weekend. I'm not going to go to a live in-person CLE. I know there's a large number of people who do. I know there are people in this room who are emphatic about live-only CLE. So I understand that there's a difference between it, but consider live in-person CLE as only one of multiple different delivery channels that you have, and quite honestly, it's the least profitable, although important, because if you're not doing the live in-person CLE, you're not going to be able to audio record it or video record it or live webcast it. So having and continuing that is important, but distribution channel-wise and delivery-wise, remember that there's a CD and a DVD component, that there's a on-demand 24/7 webcast component that's online or downloadable for everything that is captured. If you're putting on a CLE program in your section that's being audio recorded or video recorded, and I would venture to say that no one should be doing anything that is not one of those. But if it's being captured, it will end up you don't have to do anything, because it's automatically going to end up in the on-demand catalog 24/7. Whether CD or DVD is up to you. If you're audio recording, it's going to be a CD. If you're video recording it, it will be a CD and a DVD in most instances. But keep that in mind, that the delivery channels are important and extend beyond the live date for that program. And the other thing that I wanted to say, and I've talked to some of you guys about this already, General Practice Solo Small Firm has agreed, partially by some arm twisting, to do this for me as a test so that I can report on it at the October CLE committee meeting. Is a lot of the sections have figured out that bite size, what I refer to as bite size CLE, is popular. It's actually all the rage on a national level. There's still a market for live full-day programs. There's still a market for multi-day, 2- and 3-day programs. But the trend nationally, as far as what's hot right now in CLE, is bite-sized 1 to 2 hour CLE programming. And a lot of you around the room are doing 1 and 2 hour lunchtime CLE programs that are very profitable, low cost. You can put them together pretty quickly, even less than the 10-week marketing period. Reptile is famous for springing something on us within 3-week notice. And it being very successful. But those kinds of things are important to keep in mind and to note. But one of the newer things that we're doing and experiencing is what other states have had tremendous success with is taking an existing program that you've already had, that you currently have the audio or the video for, and repurposing that. This is something that's already happened. It's already been marketed. It's already in the on-demand catalog. It's already audio, video, or an audio CD or video DVD. Taking the best 1 or 2 hours of that program and assigning it a new course number and launching it into the on-demand catalog as a separate 1 or 2 hour program. If you get beyond 2 hours, it kind of loses the bite size. But if you do a 60-minute, 90-minute, 120-minute program, it's people love it. People love that abbreviated bite-size CLE. And if you do a topic that has cross-section appeal, it even makes it easier to sell to the masses. If you do it on an ethics-related topic or something, again, it increases the appeal of it. Because let me tell you, it does a few different things. In the on-demand, the 24/7 on-demand catalog, which is where most of the revenue is made and where most of the profit is made, if you're doing it there, when you take that full-day reptile program or full-day wildy program or full-day government law program, you take that program and you extract a 7 or 8 hour program and extract out the best 1 hour or 2 hour segment of it and launch it. On the catalog, it goes from just being in the government law section folder or portion of the catalog to also now being a discounted program, even though you're selling that 1 to 2 hours for $95 or $125. You're selling it higher than the price per average, but lower than the cost for the full program. So now you're in a discounted catalog, you're in an abbreviated CLE catalog, and you're in your respective area catalog. And if you're doing it for ethics, you're now in the ethics catalog, whereas the full 8 hour program or 7 hour program would not have been in the ethics catalog. The abbreviated portion that is half or more than half of ethics will then be in that. So you're hitting a lot more catalogs on the on-demand platform. So it's just something to think about with regard to bite-size CLE, not only bite-size CLE with programs that you're planning in the future to deliver over lunch, but of looking at your existing catalog of programs to say, this program is about to expire for CLE credit, or this program happened in April, but there's these 1 or 2 topics that would have wide appeal. Let's make those standalone programs and get them in the on-demand catalog and launch it. And that's something you can work with your administrators to do. Chances are they're looking at me like I'm crazy right now. They're going to come to me and ask me how to do it, when to do it, where to do it. But you can do it. And like I say, we're starting it off. I trapped Sean Desmond for wanting to know if we could do Florida Law Update that was shot at convention as one of those, and the Solo Small Firm Conference coming up in January at the winter meeting. But if you have others you want to do, let me know. The one we're going to use numbers for distribution purposes at the October CLE meeting will be what we run off the Florida Law Update.
Do we have to reapprove?
Yes.
So the bite size has to be reapproved and gets another 18 months.
Yes. And that's the key to it. Is it's going to have its own course number, its own financial statement, and its own marketing promotion, but the cost to extract that out is minimal because you have 2 costs. You have the course approval fee cost and the editing cost, and that's it. So those are really hot things that some of the other sections are certainly have already expressed interest in doing.
Terry, when you do that reapproval, does it start at the date that you get it reapproved and go 18 months as opposed to when the program was done?
Yes.
Yeah, we did something like that in the tax section where we went through and did it as a best of the best program. And we put together, I think, a CD, and we came up with, we did it as like a full day thing, as a tape, basically, and released it, and it was about 8 hours or 6 to 8 hours of the best content. And it actually did fairly well. But I think your idea is even better. Just the bite-sized program where you pull off an hour program, release that. I think that's a better idea than what we did was probably too man-intensive. But we did come up against that 18-month rule that when you were selecting a CLE, if it was more than 18 months old, that was a problem. We actually someone would have to go through and sort of reconfirm that program was still good, because for the most part it would be too old to use.
And that's exactly it. Is it the 18-month approval period does start for the approval date of the new period. But if you're using whether you're using something that's 6 months old or 2 years old or 18 months old, you're still going to want someone from the section to have looked at it and say this is still current. This is still current legal education, because whether it be 18 months old or 6 months old, it could be depending on what it is. It could be out of date. So I think that's a very good point. And I'm going to show how much I don't know about specific CLE sections here because I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think there's a couple of of sections here who have done something even a little more different. I think labor and employment law is one. I think health law might be another. There might be some others. Is I think they have planned to webcast over the course of a year or extended period of time, 6 months or so, and had scheduled webcast on a single brochure, had 4 or 5 or 6 different webcasts planned out, scheduled out, with each having its own course number, course approval, and a registration price. But then they've also, you're buying those individual segments, but then they've taken that and bundled it as a full package. And again, very few sections have done that. Some sections have done it, and the ones who have done it pretty successfully, to where they're taking a series of webcasts that they're shooting over some period of time, and it may be $125 or $150 per session that you're doing, and then you have and people could pick and choose which ones they want to go to if they have an interest. But then at the end, after all is said and done, you take that program, make it into a full audio CD or full video DVD, depending on what it is, if it's a video webcast or audio webcast, and then you take that format and then you market that as a separate standalone product than the individual webcasts. So that's another option for you to do.
Yeah, I think Appellant does that over the years.
And just speaking out a little bit in favor of live CLE again, although I am a big fan of the webcasting and that type of thing, but we've noticed sponsors like the live CLE programs. So if you want to, we have a pretty healthy sponsorship group, and so they want to see live programs and meetings. The other thing I think is that if you want to develop a signature program for your section, I don't know if you can do that through a webcast. So if you want to develop an ITC type program, International Tax Conference, or if you want to develop, Attorney Trust Officer Conference that Reptile does, or the Family Law, their certification review course apparently is like a signature program. You need to have a live program still to do that. And those programs I think are helpful, but when you're doing the live CLE, you're right. I mean, you have to be really careful on the costs, because you could easily lose money even on a very popular program.
No, absolutely. And again, there are sections who do very large, very successful live in-person kind of signature programs, but they will still offer a live webcast component. And
always. Reptile
has a legislative update coming up that's usually pretty successful like that. So I think that it is certainly the live. I don't want to discount that live events are important, because quite honestly, without the live events, you're not going to have anything to capture for the aftermarket catalog. But live events do still have a place. Two other important things that I wanted to talk about. Both of them were discussed at the CLE committee meeting. If there are individuals here who were at the CLE committee meeting in June, one of them with regard to the 24/7 on-demand catalog. We've had the same provider for that service for almost 12 years, and we periodically go back and look at the competition to see if we should be with a different provider or a different vendor. Or we go out and find a provider or a vendor who has more favorable pricing, and that was the case this past year. We went out to a fast-growing company that doesn't have a whole lot of clients and certainly doesn't have anyone as big as us, but we knew we liked their pricing model. So we went and we talked to them, and we were very open with our current provider that we were talking with someone else, and we were able to get our existing provider that we've had for 12 years, who services about 26 state bars and Georgetown CLE. I mean, we think we're with the best provider in the business, but we're able to get them to match the pricing model of this small, quickly growing, very aggressive company, and in doing that, we have a much more favorable 24/7 on-demand contract for the webcasting, for online and downloadable CLE programming. So much so that between the period of March and May of last year compared to March and May of this year, the on-demand revenue was up $150,000. Because we get a larger, the bar and the sections. The bar as a whole has a much more favorable revenue share than what we had before. We have lower transaction fees for credit card processing and their collection service, and we were able to get them to do more marketing, advertising, promotion, and increase some things on their catalog. If you go to the on-demand catalog, some of the things you see now are featured items. You'll also see kind of Amazon-esque at the bottom of the screen. You'll see people who looked at this or looked at this course also looked at these courses or purchased these courses. So we've gotten them to incorporate some of those tools into their catalog, and a lot of what they are doing in that 24/7 catalog are the things that I'm going to be talking with Marcy about when Marcy and I talk about how what from their platform do we also want to make sure that the Florida Bar's new revised, revamped shopping cart experience will include.
And kind of following up on the marketing aspect of this, once these courses are out there, don't forget to continue on the marketing with the email blasts and possibly social media. And I know that the CLE committee is also investigating alternative methods of marketing the programs, including social media and apps and that kind of stuff. So stay tuned for that too. I think that that's going to be coming down the pike.
And one of the other things that I wanted to talk about just briefly is sometimes I hear sections say it, and sometimes I hear someone in the CLE committee say it. And I always wonder what numbers they're looking at, because they're different numbers than what I'm looking at and what Marcy's looking at. But I hear people say that the sections are losing money on CLE. I hear individuals say that the bar as a whole is losing money on CLE, or that CLE revenue is declining. That's not what the numbers show. And we're this year, for the first time in a few years, we're going to actually be doing a very comprehensive annual report for CLE that we have historically done it for the bar as a whole with only a couple of line items for each section of revenue and loss. This year, when I do that annual report, it will literally have a page for every section, which will show the history, the trends, the successful programs, the not so successful programs within each section. I can tell you, as of the end of May financials, revenue total revenue for CLE was about 118% of what we budgeted. Net profit to sections through the end of May was about 139% of what we budgeted. We had budgeted about $1.3 million in profit to sections for CLE. We're at $1.7 million as of the end of May. Now, again, those are preliminary numbers. My disclaimer that I promised Marcy and Beth that I would give is those are preliminary numbers. Not all the allocations have been made. And it's being recorded, so I have given my disclaimer. But as of yesterday, and Marcy alluded to the fact that I was pressing Beth for some fresh numbers for CLE yesterday, and as of the end of the day yesterday, when on the preliminary numbers that I was given, there's only two sections out of 22 groups, which include the 20 sections of 2 divisions. Only 2 sections are actually will have a loss in revenue for the fiscal year just ending. Those 2 sections can probably predict that they're the 2 sections and what the reasons might be for that. Again, preliminary information. There's a lot more to come. We'll have full information by the October CLE committee meeting. All that information that's shared with the CLE committee meeting will be shared with the Council of Sections and section leadership. But it's CLE revenue for the bar as a whole, and CLE net profit to the sections is higher than what it's been in years. So I think it's important for you to understand that. And if you have questions on it, when you get the full comprehensive CLE annual report, certainly let me know, and we can kind of walk through this. If you have questions, ideas of things you want to do, work through your administrator to Dixie. We can have a conference call about strategizing for CLE. The goal is for you guys to build on the most effective, efficient CLE planning that you can, because it goes back to my original comment, is you guys are carrying the heavy load of educating Florida lawyers.
Right, and one thing that we were doing was we were actually tracking performance over a period of time, over a number of years. I think we might have looked at a 10-year period of time, and maybe because we have a bunch of CPAs in the group, I don't know. But we looked at what CLEs are successful, what topics are successful. We were finding, there were some surprises there. We were finding that international tax could be very successful. State tax is often very successful. So it gives you an idea of what kind of programs you might have an easier path on. And I encourage you to do that so you can see, rather than trying to have it done by memory, you're actually seeing numbers. Okay, here's how many people are attending this type of program, over this period of time. So that's something that I think we were successful with. The other thing is you also have to look at ideas to control costs, especially these live CLEs. So if you're going to be close on the numbers, to break even, and sometimes with the smaller sections that becomes an issue, let me just give you some cost control ideas since I was originally a CPA. Between 2 speakers, maybe you should ask for a local speaker. So if you're having a seminar in Orlando, I mean, I guess it's a simple thought, but you could say, okay, there's an Orlando person or there's a person in Key Largo. Maybe we'll use the Orlando person. They don't have the overnight stay at the hotel. I mean, that's just a simple idea that I've thought of sometimes and used sometimes. The chairs of the CLE, quite often if you're reimbursing them for their stay or some kind of benefit there, it's nice maybe if the chairs of the CLE are also one or more of the speakers. For the smaller sections, I also prefer that somebody speak at least 50 minutes. I don't like to bring somebody down and they're doing 30 minutes and you pay for them to come in and they're not even doing a full credit hour. Better yet, what a lot of people do is they have the person speak for 50 minutes and then they take from that group of people that came down, they do a panel like this, and they're not having another person come down. The people are already there from that group. A big controversial one in the tax section is lunch on your own. If you've ever gotten involved in what these hotels are now charging for food, it is unbelievable to me. And by the way, most of the time the people complain about the lunch then, because I've been to hotels where we're planning the event and it's sort of $40, $50 for a box lunch, and everybody gets that box lunch and they're unhappy about it. So the question is, can you say lunch on your own? And I know that's a controversial thing, at least in our section, because once people leave, there's always the risk that they're never coming back, or
it was that bad,
right? Or well, it is the tax section.
We're worried about that after lunch.
Right. Right. So you're worried about that. The after lunch speaker is often very worried because what happens is people come into their, they're coming back to the program, and quite often they're 15, 20 minutes late, and so a lot of times the after lunch speaker is a little bit upset about that. But it's an issue, I think, because they do charge a lot at these hotels for the food. And so what we've been trying to do in many cases with the lunchtime is to bring in a headline speaker. And usually, and many times, it's sponsored. So the headline speaker is not necessarily talking about the most technical topic. They're somebody who might be an attention-grabbing person. And you're bringing that person down to grab attention during lunch. A sponsor wants to sponsor that lunch. So that's a lot of times what we do with the lunch problem, because you can use that as actually a good driving force for attendance. Like I said, we brought down the former IRS commissioner. I think we brought down Mark Prater for a program we did in Gainesville. And I think he was involved with the Senate Minority Council. So that was a big-time lunch speaker. So that's something we look to do a lot, is to try to drive attendance through these sort of headline speakers. Try to make it into an event. That was actually another idea that I had when I was chair, which is that when you're doing a non-recurring program, people don't know about this program. You don't have that core audience built in. You have to make it sometimes an event to get people to go there. What's special about it? What's going to draw people out of their houses to actually go to that program? And the best example that I could think of that we had while I was Director of Education is we did a CLE in Gainesville. Now you're thinking, all right, Gainesville is not the easiest place to get to necessarily, but we did a joint program with the UF graduate tax program. And there was a lot of networking, and the UF alumni loved it. There were all these events. I didn't go to UF, but it was still a lot of fun. And we honored Professor Calfee, who's a well-known tax professor at UF. So it really became a joint program. By the way, the room was provided for free, so that helped us draw a profit for it. But it really had a big attendance because it became something more of like an event CLE. There was something special. And you could create those events by having partnerships, I think, with different schools, and just ideas like that can draw attendance to those live programs.
Buddha, do you have anything to add before we take a few questions?
No, actually, yes, a couple little items about the putting on the course itself. That one of my pet peeves of being on the CLE committee that I really wanted to point out, that especially with the aftermarket sales that the people are going to be on with webcasts and stuff like that, is two items of interest. And one is that I want to commend everybody in this room for using the microphone. When you're watching a CLE program that the people don't use the microphones to ask the questions or walk away from the podium and walk off the camera, post-production is crazy about that kind of stuff. And then one of the things, questions on CLEs are very, very important. And in this situation, if you don't use the microphones, a lot of times it'll be edited out. And so it might be a great question, but nobody hears it because you don't see it. And then also from the speaker's point of view, remember that the camera is your friend. Of course, we have kind of been bad about our camera guy, but so when you're using the eye contact and you're scanning the room and stuff, be sure to include your audience that's on the camera. Because a lot of times you'll see folks that are doing the webcast and they're looking here and looking there, but never looking straight into the camera. And those are some just presentation tips I wanted to raise.
And that's a very good point on the use of the microphone. Is the question answer periods or the random question or and answer sessions that happen periodically throughout a program. A lot of times, if the person asking the question, the registrant or the seminar attendee who is asking the question, if they don't have a microphone, and if the speaker doesn't repeat the question before providing the answer, that wonderful question and that wonderful answer are edited out of the final product. Because we can't just have moment of silence and some great answer and no one knows what the question was. And it happens, unfortunately, more than you would think, where we're losing some potentially good content for a program from the registrant speaker interaction, and that's just because it's edited out because you can't hear one or the other. Do we have questions, comments, suggestions?
Make sure you have your mic, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And by the way, if you get caught in that circumstance where there's not a mic available to pass around, tell your speakers to repeat the question. A sophisticated speaker should know that if it's being taped and the person doesn't have a microphone, they should know to say, okay, let me repeat your question. So.
Right. Well, I have a question about sort of the new webinar arrangement, and I've been involved in some of the webinars the environmental land use sections produced, and they're typically PowerPoint-driven, presentation and material. But if you have multiple people, it would be nice if you could have video capability, because I think that's more engaging to people than, sitting and looking at PowerPoint. You can, look at body language and, you can have a panel kind of discussion in that format. Is that something that?
Yes.
Yes.
It's coming.
Okay.
We don't have it yet. We expect by next year. We expect our provider by next year. It's the same provider we've had for 12 years. One of the expansion tools that they're looking at adding in December is the ability to take that audio webcast that you're currently doing with audio through the computer and a PowerPoint, is to have a dual screen, kind of like what your live webcast is now, to where you could, as long as the speaker has a camera on their computer, and as long as they're cognizant about what they're doing on the camera, that you would have the PowerPoint and the video of the speaker. And if you have speakers in multiple locations, the moderator will be able to switch. You may have a speaker here in Tallahassee and one in Tampa, one in Miami, and the moderator would know based on PowerPoint slide and key triggers in the presentation of where to flip to the camera.
Right. Oh, that's great. That's great. Because I think you can design programs in a different fashion than you are now that might be more interesting than just the straight information delivery.
Let me start here.
Just a question and a comment. The question, and we've wrestled with this a little bit. First of all, how do you reconcile the government employee discounts with the gifting restrictions in Florida statutes? Has that become an issue ever? Or, it just struck us that could be a problem. So that was the question. And then the comment related to guidelines or some suggestions as to how you handle law students for some of these CLEs. We have had many conversations in the section group, as to discounts, maybe free attendance at some of our CLEs, just to basically provide a platform for the law students to engage with, because obviously the law students, or at least many of them, simply can't afford some of the fees that these CLEs engender.
Yeah, the easier question to answer there is the law student question, and that's that we do have, for almost all CLE programming across almost all sections, a discounted half price fee for law school, for full-time law students and law faculty. It's not free, and I would advise against free because it's your bottom line and your profit that goes away, because there is a cost to providing that service, whether it be live or aftermarket. The other question is probably could be better answered by the section who is doing the discounted government programming, and the one that I know happens, and if Chase is still in the room, he could correct me if I'm wrong, is it the either criminal or appellate? One of them does an annual program where they provide a discounted price to state attorneys, public defenders. I'm not sure how that's accounted for in any gifting. I don't know if Marcy knows. I don't know if anybody else knows. I know that my best guess is we leave that up between the registrant and the government. Is that correct, Marcy? Marcy's shaking her head. Yes, yes. But so that's kind of how that's handled. Is they can do it, but it's and I know the similar questions have come up with the government law section and having sponsors for CLE programs where people are attending or some of their events, and it's generally left up to the registrant and their ethics office or whoever they need to talk, their compliance office or whoever they need to talk to.
Right, and we provide discounts also to law students. I mean, I think that's pretty standard.
Yeah.
I'm Francine Folks, and actually, although I'm here representing administrative law, supposedly, but actually I'm the incoming treasurer with the government lawyer section. And the answer to your question on that is we have consulted with the Commission on Ethics, and it can be done. So there's no gift problem across the board, but. My comment was something you said earlier, and maybe I've been in these sections for a while and heard the same gripes along the way, and it was very enlightening today in Marcy's presentation to get, because I was co-chair of this program, a breakdown of the year-to-date expenses and revenues for the practice before DOA, because we always heard, aftermarket sales make up stuff. Aftermarket sales will help when you see an immediate loss. But I actually see it on here. Almost a year later, almost $5,600. And I think that's one of the things that we're missing, and that ends up being, that's why there's grabs. That's why you hear the comments you hear, and then you don't understand because you're looking at the overall numbers and going, yeah, you're making money. Because at the immediate point, or even 60 days after, you might see a loss, but then a year later, you don't hear a follow-up. Oh, by the way, that program where we thought there was a loss, look at what happened. Or at the end of its 18-month cycle, an analysis of how much money that program made, both, live and in aftermarket sales. And I think these reports that you're all talking about and being able to bring those to the section executive councils and members will help to answer some of those questions and deal with those, gripes, so to speak, that I call them over the years.
Good, and I'm glad you said that, because that was one of my big takeaways at the beginning is that the live event is where it starts, not where it ends. And one of the things that, and Marcy and I talk constantly, daily, and one of the things that we want to make sure that certainly on the CLE financial statement that has the footnoting that we're not accounting for a CLE program only in the fiscal year that it happens, but we're accounting for it in the 18-month life cycle of the program, so that you truly do over the 18 months see profitability, and you're seeing, and you're going to quickly realize is that the most of the profit is going to come from the aftermarket sales beyond the 60 and 90 day after the live mark event.
But I'm sorry, I would also encourage you, though, to track your performance, because you can't just do a program and say, oh, well, we lost a bunch of money, but aftermarket will fix everything. Sometimes you just didn't pick the right topic, or, it was more section service than something that was going to draw a lot of people. So, monitor those programs, see what they're doing aftermarket, and then for the most part, that type of program might not be successful in the future. You just can't assume that aftermarket is going to fix it.
With the emphasis on aftermarket as now the primary source of revenue, our marketing has always been focused on the front end to live seminars, et cetera. What are some of the more creative approaches you've seen or could recommend to ensuring that you maximize your aftermarket sales, particularly as a CLE rolls to a period of time where it might not be, its currency is about to expire. You want to make sure you squeeze the last bit of revenue out. What have you seen sections do that work?
I think that a couple of different things, and it's a very good question. A couple of different things. I think it's vitally important to continue promoting the live event and the ways that you've been doing it. I certainly wouldn't discourage or recommend that anybody do anything different or less on the live marketing or the marketing for the live program. I will tell you that what some sections do quite effectively is in their newsletters, in their monthly communications, they will have a list of on-demand programs that are available for their section. They'll do a featured on-demand program. So even after the live event has come and gone, when the newsletter comes out, it has a list of on-demand programs. If it's an email communication or electronic newsletter, they will have links to those. The bar as a whole, all of you should see them, is about every 6 weeks we send out an email to all eligible members that has Florida Bar CLE, it's from Florida Bar CLE, that features on-demand programming, and we'll have a featured upcoming program or a featured on-demand program, but it links to all the on-demand programming, and that goes out to all eligible bar members about every 6 weeks. We also have contracted with two of our existing providers, one being the 24/7 on-demand provider, sends out an email the first week of every month promoting the top 10 or 12 most recent launched featured items in the on-demand catalog. That comes out from Florida Bar Online CLE. And then LexisNexis does a email, they do 2 emails a month. One's featured on publications, the other's on CLE, and they will feature upcoming live programs, but occasionally will also link to some on-demand programs. And that goes back to the marketing component, whereas if you miss the key marketing deadlines and you don't have your program or brochure is not live on the bar website, it's probably not going to make it into those respective bar-wide communications, just because it's not live when it gets pulled for those pieces to be built.
Terry, you mentioned earlier about some of the problems that may be facing government lawyers when it comes to CLEs and sponsorship. And when you were discussing earlier about having lunch sponsored during an event as a possibility, I don't think it's so possible for government lawyers, especially when you know who the audience is going to be. And I didn't know whether you had any other ideas, Mark, that you had faced while you were looking at different ways to provide lunch or to make sure people come back?
Yeah, I think you just maybe you give them an hour and a half as opposed to an hour is one idea if you're worried about if you're going to do lunch on your own. I don't know, in the tax section, we don't really have the problem, I don't think, with the sponsor providing lunch. The only problem we've ever had is IRS agents we can't pay for them to come down. In fact, they never seem to come anyway. A lot of times they cancel, so you have to be very careful with them. But I think that's a problem. It sounds like you're not able to get a sponsor for lunch, so you either need to do lunch on your own, or maybe you need to do something outside of a hotel. Maybe the hotel could be a problem because they charge so much for the lunch. And so you'll have to maybe look at alternative locations, a university, something like that could provide the location. And maybe, I mean, that's a difficult scenario, but lunch on your own or a cheaper venue. Bring your own lunch.
Not yet.
That's my new idea.
Couple of questions. First, you mentioned what the profit is. What are the gross revenues from CLE, approximately?
And I don't have that. I'd have to look at it.
Gross. What type of numbers are we talking about?
I'd be making it up. Marcy, do you have any idea what gross revenue from CLE is? I generally don't look at gross revenue. I generally look at bottom line. I mean, quite honestly, I look at what section share profit, bar share profit. I do generally track what total revenue is to expenses or to budget, and what expenses are to budget. But I could very easily find that out, but I can't tell you off the top of my head.
One of the things I was going to offer is, from the reptile side, we have programmed for our CLE chairs internally do's and don'ts. Some of what you've covered here, and some of it going more detail as to how to make a program work monetarily and substantively. And I'll put my CLE chairs on risk here, but we'll offer that up if you want to distribute that out. We have to make certain we don't have any proprietary information that's copyrighted by some third party on there. But we'll do that because what I'm seeing around the table is a lot of everyone's inventing the wheel on their own. And if we can help avoid that, let's use what we've done before. The reason I've asked about the revenue numbers is we have a multi-million-dollar business here. The marketplace has changed totally in the last 5 years in many different terms. One is how information is received by individuals. You know, the old fashion of just sticking someone up behind a podium doesn't work, and even how PowerPoints, I mean, we have guidelines now as to what you can put down on a PowerPoint because it's gotten crazy, as well as how things are transmitted. I'm not going to say you're watching the football game on the couch, and that's how you want to deal with it. But, you know, many of us, we get on an airplane, we're going to be on it for an hour and a half to Atlanta. That's a perfect way to market a program. But none of us, I think, around this table, and my apologies if I'm saying this wrong, have any marketing experience. We think we market our law firms, and we know how well we do at that when we want to say it. And you know, this is an old issue with me, but we're watching many, many new players come into this, and we're losing market share. And, well, we don't know, all right? You shake your head. Yes. Revenues are going up, but we don't know even, and this is such an important business, we don't even know what our gross revenues are, even in some gross number, all right? What I'm suggesting is that the bar hire a professional marketing group to understand what is our real customer base out there. How do we get to that? What their expectations are? What we should be doing in our programs to convey the information and to market it. Because, you know, for example, breaking down into the 1-hour programs, we came up with that a year ago, all right, back at our summer meetings. And I think this is something that we need, and for each of us to do it on our own, is not cost effective, and we're going to be stumbling over ourselves. So the question is, will the bar step up and do this marketing program? I've heard before that when we have talent inside, there was Yvonne, she's not available anymore. I don't know that we can do this internally, and I know I'm sort of throwing this out on the table, but I have very grave concerns, not just from an economic perspective, but also loyalty to the sections from our customers, as well as the professionalism issue of what we're trying to convey to our members.
No, I think it's a very good point. I think it's something that we certainly need to look at as far as marketing. I can tell you that a lot of and I do think a lot of times sections do end up spinning their wheels and a lot of times recreating things that other sections already have. And my advice there would be is we do have a staff of 10 program administrators who have a monthly meeting, whose offices are very relatively located close to each other. They talk all the time. So if your section is looking to go out, research, investigate, think about doing something differently, probably the first place to start is checking with your administrator to have them poll the other administrators, and this happens more frequently than what you might think, as to what other sections are doing and what work product they could share back to the section. Again, it's not always the case, and what one section has done or is doing, it may not very fit what the other section is doing. But there's a lot of research and development and programming and thought going on across all the sections. YLD is constantly thinking about new and better ways to do things. And they have resources that they can share, as well as other sections having things that they could share. So a lot of it is just making sure that if you're going to do some due diligence on those types of things, make the first stop the program administrator and have them poll the audience, if you will, of other administrators to see what they're doing and get that feedback. Marketing, we partner, we do a lot of the marketing ourselves. We have Lexus doing marketing, we have Enrich doing marketing. Is there more that we could be doing on marketing? I'm certain there is, and that's certainly something we should look at. And I think we have looked at it. We're doing a lot more in marketing than what we have done ever in the past. But are we doing more as to target market, and surveying it? With regard to market share, we do look at that about every 2 years, and we know if we saw it go from 52% to 54% to 56%. So we have increasing market share, increasing revenue, and those numbers will be included in the annual report. 2 years ago, they were included in the annual report. So with that, we can include. We'll make sure we include in there. So we know it's there. Maybe we had to do a better job of sharing that information out to the sections.
I want to go one more fundamental step, though, and that is we have a drastically different market out there than what it had been for the last 25 or 30 years before that. And for us to say we're going to do some more email blasts and we're looking at the market, with the dollars involved, it would seem that we should have someone doing a true look at what our market is, what we should be doing, not only in terms of the product that we are conveying, but also how we are trying to bring those folks in to us.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And that's one of the things that I believe it's on the agenda for the Program Evaluation Committee next week is actually a survey and potentially evaluation of BAR CLE. Which would encapsulate that type of discussion. And what would the timeline of making a decision to bring in a marketing group be? That I don't know. That will be discussed at the Program Evaluation Committee, but I'm not sure. I'll be at that meeting, but I can report back to what happens at that meeting. That'd be appreciated. The next question is, in terms of multiple licensing for CLEs, what thought has there been, because I know we've had some discussions on it, is you buy a tape for $195, you bring it back to your firm, and 25 people utilize it. What thought has there been to start restricting licensing as to how many CLE credits can be plugged in or sought for one purchase of a tape? To the best of my knowledge, none. To the best of my knowledge is when someone buys a CD or a DVD, historically, always, as far as back as I know, which predates me being here, is that could be shared out. It could be libraries buy it and they loan it out to their constituents. I mean, it's always been. I think it's important to realize is that BAR CLE's mission is to educate Florida lawyers, not to sell credit. And sometimes those lines get blurred, especially when it's a big source of revenue for sections. But our primary goal is to educate Florida lawyers, and by educating Florida lawyers, make sure that the public's protected. So I think that's the primary goal. I don't know that anybody's looked at that. I can tell you that since I've been here, no one has really looked at, and there hasn't been an effort to charge for posting CLE credit or charge for sharing CLE credit. Some states do it, and from what I hear from those states, it's frowned upon, and their members don't like it very much. They may not like it, but as the marketplace for technology and multimedia has moved from you buy a album and you can tape it, do whatever you want, to the electronic downloads where it's just yours to use, that's another marketplace change we may want to be looking at least to say this is something we've made a deliberate decision not to do it because of the professionalism issue. And thank you for your time. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
We're about to break for lunch. Let me take what I'll grab as maybe a point of host privilege and offer a slight bit of editorialized commentary. And if any of this is inaccurate, gentlemen, correct me. But two things that have crept up in my time being sort of active with leadership and being heavily involved with CLEs. One is some pushback from the sections about the costs. That the BAR's costs are extraordinary, and how can it costs us so much to put these things on, how can we do it, how can we do it? And a related point is the opportunity now that all of our members have to go elsewhere to private vendors to get their education credits. And I think the answer to both, the response to both, is the same. It's that this is a service to ourselves, and it's a way of supporting the bar. There is a lot of money that comes through CLE, that comes into the bar. if you think about that, and remember, the bar is not exactly awash in extra cash. That money gets used here. It supports this building. It supports the structure that we all utilize as the bar. And by putting on CLEs, you're not just educating the members of your section or whoever your target audience is. You're helping support the bar. And that's critically important. And it's the same response with attending. By choosing to come to a bar CLE as opposed to one of the private vendors' CLEs, you're supporting the bar. And I think it's important that we just get that message out to the leadership. I think the leadership should appreciate that, take that message, to the rest of the leaders within their sections, but also to the sections as a whole and the bar membership as a whole, that this is important. It's a critical part of how the bar survives.